Hello everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition of Video Clips. And I just kind of laugh at the things that people write to me about. And one of them is, you'd have more credibility if you wore a different shirt every day. Well, here's a newsflash. I record these all on the same day because I'm already not sleeping very much and I don't have time for a wardrobe change in between filming. Be happy about the free information. Could we just go with that and stop worrying about what I'm wearing or not wearing or whatever? All right, and remember, pampopper@msn.com. Time to talk about careers. We're going to start a whole new group of people who want to be in the business that we're in. Do you think this would be a good time for informed medical decision making? I think so. That's the business we're in. And our people saw through this nonsense from the get-go. All right, on Friday I talk about consequences, and then we're going to finish with something funny because we have to finish with something funny. All right. This comes from a woman who works in the field of elder services at the Council on Aging in my town. My job as a receptionist at the senior center has morphed into a hotline dealing with terrified, isolated seniors who all these months later are now showing signs of depression and resignation. Yeah, it's real. Luckily, we're in a community that has had zero COVID deaths and few cases. We do have a significant population of 60 plus years old people, nearly 40% of the population. Total population is now around 13,000 people. Despite these figures and no deaths, the fear is palpable and the mask wearing acute. We had a little gathering outside in the 90-degree weather and one of our seniors passed out. She was wearing a mask and suffers already from other health issues, including COPD. Apparently being an older adult has become a comorbidity in this country. She's still in the hospital. You take a person, an older person with COPD, and put her in the heat wearing a mask. Who does that? Criminals do that. That's what criminals do. All right, one of these days we will get these people criminally for the things that they're doing. All right, my husband's aunt and uncle, who were in their late 80s, reached a point where they were no longer able to care for themselves, and so they checked themselves into an assisted living center about a year ago in Oregon, where they were born and raised. He'd been a career minister, and besides being a Sunday school teacher, his wife volunteered selflessly in every way possible, helping out the church and community. Both were very sociable, beautiful people with countless friends who loved them dearly. When the lockdowns ensued in March, their health started going downhill rapidly. Of course, no one was allowed to visit them, but when his aunt's health failed further, they took her away to a separate intensive care ward in the same building, and not even her husband of 65 years was allowed to visit her. There's not been a single case reported in the facility. Of course, they would argue that's because they did such a good job locking everybody up. To date, there have been only 3 deaths in a county of 30,000, and who knows if even those were legit. 2 months later, the aunt died, not from COVID, and the family wanted to have some sort of funeral for her and involve his uncle in some way. The only solution allowed was to hold a small service of immediate family only in the parking lot of the care center, where the uncle, who's extremely hard of hearing, could watch through the window if we all wore masks. So the day came, and as luck would have it, the weather did not cooperate. We were all gathered outside the window in a torrential downpour, getting absolutely drenched, including my husband's 90-year-old mother, trying to hold a service while the uncle sat in his wheelchair behind the window where he could watch. There he sat, looking out at a bunch of masked faces, unable to hear, unable to be comforted, and we could all see him crying like a little baby and were helpless to console him in any way. He was not allowed to go with us to the burial site, so we tried saying our goodbyes by waving at him through the window, and I expect that will be the last we ever see of this kind and gentle, godly man. I'm just relieved my 98-year-old mother died 2 years ago with all of her 8 kids at her bedside, as it should be. What kind of cold, heartless, cowardly, unconscionable people do this? Great moments in public health indeed. Yeah, so when I compare the despots and criminals who've taken over our lives to Nazis, you want to tell me the Nazis were better? You want to tell me that this is okay? It's exactly comparable to what, a complete disregard for human life. Complete disregard. I'm a teacher with 3 adult children ages 32, 30, and 28. On March 2nd, right in the beginning of the pandemic, my youngest daughter, who lives in Nashville, took a direct hit from the tornado that hit that night. She lived in an apartment building that was shown on the news every day. Luckily, she was able to get out and down the street before the building flooded and when the roof came off. All she had when she got out was an old pair of sweatpants and her flip-flops. She actually ran back to get her work laptop and grab her car keys. For some odd reason, my phone was off that night. I didn't get her messages until I got up at 5:30. By that time, she was with a friend who had no power, but at least was able to hang out there until morning. I decided to take Friday off and fly down there to help her out as she was dazed and in shock. The airports were packed with people, and I heard many laughing about making sure they washed their hands for 20 seconds, etc. We spent the weekend getting things out that we could salvage and getting her set up in a hotel. I flew home late Sunday night because I had a workshop on Monday that the district paid for and I couldn't miss it. I was exhausted, but I powered through. Now, my oldest daughter was getting married in a small ceremony on Friday, the 13th. Yes, she and her husband are quirky like that and thought it would be fun. Unfortunately, when they picked the date, there was no pandemic and they had no idea what was going to happen. She was also 27 weeks pregnant with my first grandchild, a boy, and was planning a larger reception on Labor Day weekend. So as the week progressed, I was worried about my daughter in Nashville, how long she could stay at the hotel, how long her job would let her work remotely, and now more and more things were happening with the coronavirus, so we had to change some of the wedding plans to have a catered dinner at the house instead of going out after the ceremony. Guess who was in charge of the food? Me. So I was trying to take care of all of this and still teach. My daughter was told she could fly home for 6 weeks and work remotely, so we got her on a flight for Saturday. We FaceTimed the ceremony with her, but as Friday went on, flights were being canceled, and I spent what was supposed to be a great day with my daughter and her husband and close family and friends, being worried and sick about getting my youngest home from Nashville, since she had no place else to live if she couldn't fly home. Thankfully, she made it and I could take a breather. On Sunday, I waited all day to find out if we were going back to school on Monday. We got an email from the superintendent at 9 p.m. on Sunday that we were to work from home for the week. Phew! Now all I had to worry about was the pandemic. I was so relieved because the last 2 weeks had been so stressful. On Monday morning, I drove to school to pick up a project that I'd been working on so I could finish it at home. I stopped to the store to get diapers for my daughter and pick her up some toilet paper since she had none. She and her husband had picked up the nursery furniture on Saturday and were excited to start filling up the room with baby things. When I got to school, she called and asked if I could meet her at the obstetrician. She had called them because she didn't feel the baby moving around. Her husband was at work, so of course I went. She was allowed to bring one person with her. When they did an ultrasound, they said the baby had died. I think everyone was in shock. She had the textbook perfect pregnancy, no morning sickness, only gained 12 pounds at that point, passed every milestone with flying colors. Now I have to console my grieving daughter who thinks she's at fault, as well as thinks she's going to die. Plus, to call her husband and her new mother-in-law. They tell us that no one can come with her to the hospital to deliver her dead son except her husband, and if he leaves at any time, he's not allowed back in. Mind you, they had no idea what to expect as their birthing classes were scheduled to begin that week. They were frightened, and so were we. Now I've got to go home and wait. We can't be there to help ease their fears or give her husband a break. She was induced and had every possible reaction to the drugs. She's always been very healthy, and her body just couldn't process all the things they were giving her. She thought she was dying. She finally delivered late Tuesday night, so we've been living this new nightmare for almost 2 days. We were not allowed in the hospital. I never got to hold my first grandchild. I never even got to see him before he was taken away and cremated. My first grandchild, and we didn't even have any cases in upstate New York at the time. We couldn't be there to console them. They stopped by Wednesday on the way home from the hospital because I had to pick up some things at the pharmacy to help dry up her milk. I made them food to take home, and off they went. I think we collapsed at that point and tried to get some sleep. Thursday morning, 9 a.m., I have a Zoom meeting with our supervisor. Cuomo is going to close schools for another week at least, so we have to have plans done and meetings set up with our students for next week. Where are my bereavement days? I haven't even taken a breath in 2 weeks, and now I have to start teaching remotely, which doesn't sound that awful for someone who's done it before, but we were all starting from scratch, and I was still in shock and grief. The following week, my daughter had to go pick up her ashes by herself. No one else was allowed in with her. How sad is that? And people wonder why I'm bitter about all this. I think I cried every day for 3 months. I feel like I could cry at any moment. I think I could cry too. All right. And you don't think these people are Nazis. You don't think there's something seriously wrong with this. You mask-wearing cowards who are co-conspirators to this. I hope you're really happy with yourself. Probably not watching this. You don't want to watch anything except what the fake news tells you every day about what's going on. 200 people got the flu in Ohio by knocking on doors. This kind of stuff goes on, and you think that's okay. You ought to look at yourself in the mirror sometime. All right, 2 weeks before the lockdown, my mother received the news her cancer had advanced to stage 4. She wisely opted to go into hospice instead of undergoing chemotherapy treatments. She wanted to stay in her apartment and be cared for by family in hospice. My siblings and I traveled to Texas, but several days after we arrived, the retirement community kicked family members and hospice staff out. Then they moved my mother out of her apartment and into skilled nursing. They would not let her take her computer or any of her other personal belongings. The reasoning was that those items might be contaminated. At 91 years old, my mother loved communicating with her friends and family on Facebook and email. losing access to her computer was a real blow. Because for somebody who's 91 and dying, you want to make sure you take away their connection to life outside the room you imprisoned them in. My family has a long-standing practice that whenever a loved one is hospitalized, a family member is present at all times. If family members had been with her, my mother would not have fallen, reaching for a glass of water, and landed on her head. We might have been able to prevent or alleviate the severe pressure sores she developed all over her backside. Under normal circumstances, the hospital would be in a boatload of trouble for letting a patient's pressure sores get to that point, but we couldn't even get access to photograph them or to help with massage. Although the cancer was not causing her any pain, the hospital had to put her on heavy morphine doses because of the pressure sores. We had been speaking with her on the phone every day, but we knew the morphine would make it difficult for her to talk on the phone, so we convinced the nursing staff to take our tablet into her room and assist us with a Zoom session. It was the last conversation we ever had with her. Saying goodbye to your dying mother in a family Zoom conference is a disgraceful practice. This experience was so traumatic, I've declined in every single Zoom invitation, reading circle meetings, virtual wine tastings, neighborhood watch meetings during this shutdown. My mother passed away on April 7th, but we've yet to have a memorial service. My siblings and I reject the idea of a virtual service or one that involves draconian restrictions like masks and distancing. So it's just, I don't know what you say about this, and I don't know what you say about people who think it's okay. I mean, that's the thing that shocks me, is that I can't imagine that the mask-wearing cowards hiding in the basement thinking that I'm the crazy one talking about this being what it is. I can't imagine they don't hear about things like this. So you must hear about it and think it's okay. What kind of person are you? All right, so we have to end the week with some levity. I mean, you just can't. I get about, 500-600 emails like this a day, all right? A day. And I'm happy to get. I'm trying to answer every email personally that I can. So we have to finish with something humorous because you just can't end on that note. So Calvary Chapel of the Desert was informed by the state that it was violating the state's strict restrictions on church gatherings. And this was in Carson City, Nevada. So Pastor Chuck Carver figured out a clever way around the stringent requirements. He installed slot machines in the church, and now the church can do whatever it wants. We put up the slot machines and bam, no more restrictions, Carver said Sunday. The authorities dispersed and we pretty much get to do whatever we want. What happens in Calvary Chapel stays in Calvary Chapel. He then preached a solemn sermon in front of the blinking lights and blaring sirens from the slots. Yeah, it looks kind of goofy, he said later, but it's no different than when I have to preach in front of our zany VBS decorations. Plus, it's making up for all the lost tithing over the last few months because people are using the machines. Anyone playing the slot machines will, of course, be served complimentary grape juice and crackers. So just think about the insanity of this. If you live in Nevada, it is not okay to go to church, but it's okay to go to the casino. So if you take the church and you install slot machines, now it's okay to go to church. And that is COVID land, where we have week upon week upon week with fact-free hysteria, where nothing makes sense. It's a different universe. It's a dystopian nightmare from which we have to wake up pretty soon. Speaking of which, MakeAmericansFreeAgain.com. Sign up. And we're getting ready to do kind of an aggressive recruiting program and give you some tools and things to take out into the community. Stay tuned for that. But make sure that you're talking to people about it every day. United we stand. You guys have heard that before. We have to get the group of people who are thinking people together so we can overcome this tyranny and this evil and this vicious, god-awful stuff that these terrible people are doing to humanity. These are crimes against humanity. And but we're going to win. I'm confident we're going to win. I really am. If I weren't confident we were going to win, I sure as heck wouldn't be doing this because it sure is a lot of work. All right, you can tell my voice is starting to go. All right, well, that's enough. On that note, we'll just end it for the week. Pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it. I will be back to you next week with more news.